My name's Jack Whitman, and I live on Silver Creek Ranch, a quiet piece of land just outside of Willow Ridge Estates. My family's owned this ranch for 3 generations. It's not some massive, sprawling operation. Just a few acres, a barn, some cattle, and the one thing my late wife, Emily, always wanted: a pool. It's nothing fancy, just a good-sized pool we built years ago so we could cool off in the brutal Texas summers. For a long time, life out here was peaceful. But that all changed when the developers showed up. They paved roads, put up identical houses with identical fences, and brought in a homeowners association to make sure everything stayed perfect. At first I ignored them. Willow Ridge wasn't my problem, I wasn't part of their community, and I sure as hell wasn't about to start taking orders from a group of people who moved in last year and suddenly thought they ran the place. Turns out they did think they ran the place, including my ranch. It started with a letter. I found it in my mailbox one morning, printed on fancy HOA letterhead. Something about non-compliant structures and aesthetic uniformity. I barely made it halfway through before tossing it in the trash. Then came the visits. Linda Prescott, the self-important HOA president, was the first to show up. Short blonde bob, designer sunglasses, clipboard in hand, she looked more like a real estate agent than someone who was supposed to be managing a neighborhood. She wasted no time. "Mr. Whitman," she said, forcing a tight-lipped smile, "we need to discuss your property's compliance with community guidelines." I leaned against my fence, crossing my arms. "Linda, my property isn't in your community." She gave a little laugh, like I was just too simple to understand what she was saying. "Silver Creek Ranch falls within the visual jurisdiction of Willow Ridge Estates," she explained, "which means we have a responsibility to ensure all visible structures align with HOA standards." I stared at her. "You're telling me my ranch, which existed before your subdivision even broke ground, now has to follow your rules?" "That's correct," she said smoothly, "and your pool, I'm afraid, does not meet our guidelines. All community pools must be standard concrete or tile with an HOA-approved fence." I shook my head. "Linda, this isn't a community pool. It's my pool, on my land." Her smile never wavered. "We'll be sending an official notice. You have 21 days to comply." And just like that, she turned and walked away. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. I wasn't the kind of man to take orders, especially not from people who had no claim over me or my land. But I also wasn't about to let this nonsense drag on longer than necessary. So, after Linda Prescott left my ranch that morning, I did what any reasonable person would do. I got in my truck and drove straight to the county office. I figured a quick chat with the local government would clear things up. Silver Creek Ranch had been in my family for generations. There wasn't a single legal document tying me to Willow Ridge Estates or their HOA. All I needed was someone in an official capacity to confirm what I already knew. Linda and her little board had no authority over my property. I met with a county land official, a middle-aged man named Robert Martinez, who had been working in zoning and property records for years. He looked over my deed, nodded, and pushed his glasses up his nose. "Yeah, Jack, you're not part of the HOA. Never have been, never will be," he said plainly. "They've got no legal right to enforce anything on your property." "That's what I thought," I said, relieved. "So if they try to fine me, threaten me, or pull any of their stunts, I can ignore them?" Robert hesitated. "In theory, yes. But HOAs don't always operate within their actual authority. They'll send fake fines, claim visual jurisdiction, even try to strong-arm property owners with legal threats. They count on people getting scared and giving in." I exhaled slowly. "So, what do I do?" He leaned forward. "First, document everything. Keep every letter they send. Record every conversation you have with them. If they show up on your property again, tell them to leave. And if they don't, call the sheriff." I left the county office feeling reassured. I had the law on my side. If Linda and her board tried anything else, I'd be ready. But Linda, she wasn't the type to back down easily. 3 days later, I received another letter. This one stamped with bold red letters, "Final warning." According to Linda, my refusal to comply meant the HOA had no choice but to escalate the situation. They were now issuing me a daily fine of $350 until I removed or rebuilt my pool to match their guidelines. The letter claimed they had full legal authority to enforce penalties and that unpaid fines could result in a lien on my property. I'll admit, for a second, that last part made me pause. I wasn't a lawyer, but I knew liens were serious business. If an HOA could file a lien against my land, I needed to stop this before it got out of control. So I did what Robert suggested. I called my lawyer, Robert Hayes. Robert had been handling land disputes for over 20 years. He let out a long sigh when I told him what was going on. "They can't do this, Jack," he said firmly, "but they will keep trying." "What's my next step?" I asked. "For now, don't pay a dime. They have no legal standing to fine you, but if they attempt to file a lien, let me know immediately. In the meantime, send me copies of every letter they send, and I'll draft a formal cease and desist notice." That made me feel better. But what happened next? That's when things really took a turn. It was a Saturday morning when I stepped outside and saw something that made my blood run hot. A sign. Right there at the edge of my property, staked into the ground like it had been there forever, was a bright blue HOA sign that read, "Willow Ridge Estates Community Pool, Private HOA Members Only." I was so stunned, I had to read it twice. I marched right over and ripped the sign out of the ground. My land, my pool. That same afternoon, I got a visit from Linda. She showed up with 2 of her HOA board members, Carl Simmons and Nancy Blake, both standing behind her like goons waiting for a fight. "Jack, this is unacceptable," Linda huffed, arms crossed. "That sign was meant to inform community members that the pool is for authorized residents only." "You mean my pool?" I shot back. "The one that's on my property?" Linda didn't blink. "Jack, you're being difficult. The HOA board has decided that your pool is a community asset. If you'd simply agree to let Willow Ridge residents use it, we wouldn't have to keep escalating this situation." I laughed out loud. "Oh, you decided, did you? Without my input, without my consent, and now you're trying to tell me my pool belongs to your HOA?" "It benefits everyone," Linda insisted. "Your property is adjacent to the neighborhood, and our members don't have easy access to recreational facilities. This is the best solution for everyone." Carl, the board member next to her, chimed in. "You wouldn't have to worry about maintenance. We'd handle the upkeep, and you'd be fairly compensated." I took a step forward. "Let me be real clear. This pool is not yours. It never will be yours. And if I catch one more person trespassing on my property, I'll call the sheriff and have them arrested." Linda's lips pressed into a thin line. "Jack, if you refuse to cooperate, we'll have no choice but to move forward with legal action." I was done listening. "Get off my land." They left, but I knew this wasn't over. That evening, I sat on my porch, rubbing my temples. This whole thing had started as an annoying dispute, but now, it was turning into something much bigger. And if Linda thought I was going to roll over and let her claim my land, she was out of her damn mind. I called my neighbor, Henry Dawson. He was one of the few ranchers left in the area who had been here long before the HOAs took over. When I told him what was happening, he let out a low whistle. "Damn, Jack. These people don't know when to quit, do they?" "No, they don't," I muttered. "But I'm not letting them take what's mine." "Well, if you need backup, you know where to find me," Henry said. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that things were going to get worse before they got better. And I was right, because the very next morning, I stepped outside and saw dozens of strangers in my backyard. They were swimming in my pool, drinking beers, grilling burgers, acting like my property was their personal country club. And standing in the middle of it all, watching with satisfaction, was Linda Prescott. That's when I knew. This wasn't just a dispute anymore. This was war. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Dozens of people, strangers, were sprawled across my backyard, acting like they belonged there. Kids were splashing in the pool, their parents lounging in foldable chairs with drinks in hand. Someone had even dragged in a full-sized grill and was flipping burgers like it was some kind of neighborhood block party. And standing at the center of it all, surveying my land like she owned it, was Linda Prescott. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my temper in check. I had seen HOA overreach before, but this was trespassing, plain and simple. I stormed toward Linda, my voice sharp. "You've got about 30 seconds to explain why the hell there are strangers swimming in my pool." Linda barely spared me a glance, smiling as if I were nothing more than an inconvenience. "Oh, Jack, don't be so dramatic. We're just making use of a community resource." I clenched my fists. Community resource? You mean my land? My pool? The one you have no legal claim to? She sighed, shaking her head as if I were a stubborn child. "Jack, I sent you multiple notices. Since you refused to comply, the HOA board voted unanimously to classify your pool as a shared neighborhood amenity. Our members pay for community privileges, and this is one of them now." I couldn't help but let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "So let me get this straight. Because you voted on it, you think you can just waltz onto my property and start throwing pool parties? That's not how this works, Linda." She folded her arms, still completely unfazed. "You should have taken our offer, Jack. You could have profited from this, but instead, you forced our hand. We're simply doing what's best for the community." I scanned the crowd. Some of them were staring, realizing something wasn't right. A few were starting to pack up their things, sensing the tension in the air. But others, Linda's loyal HOA lackeys, stood firm, confident that they were in the right. I was done talking. I pulled out my phone and dialed the sheriff. "Yeah, this is Jack Whitman out at Silver Creek Ranch. I've got trespassers on my property. I need officers out here now." Linda's eyes flickered with something, just a flash of uncertainty, before she regained her composure. "Calling the cops?" she scoffed. "How childish." I lowered my phone. "Linda, in about 10 minutes, you're going to find out just how serious I am." It didn't take long. The sound of sirens cut through the air, and soon enough, 2 county sheriff's vehicles pulled up, kicking up dust as they stopped near the fence. Officers stepped out, hands resting on their belts, taking in the scene. One of them, Deputy Mark Carson, was someone I'd known for years. His sharp eyes swept over the crowd before settling on me. "Jack," he greeted, then gestured to the chaos behind me. "You want to tell me what's going on here?" "Gladly," I said, voice tight. "The HOA thinks they own my damn property. They're throwing a party in my backyard without my permission." Before I could say another word, Linda stepped forward, smiling like she was at a charity gala. "Officers, I'm so sorry you were called out here for something so minor. This is all a big misunderstanding." Deputy Carson arched a brow. "A misunderstanding?" Linda nodded. "Mr. Whitman's property is adjacent to our neighborhood, and the HOA board has determined that his pool should be a shared community feature." She smiled sweetly. "We're simply exercising our rights as outlined in our newly amended HOA guidelines." Deputy Carson blinked at her. Then he turned to me. "Jack, your land's still private, right?" "Unless something changed in the last 48 hours without me knowing," I said dryly. Carson sighed. "All right then. This is trespassing." He turned back to Linda, his expression hardening. "Ma'am, I need you and your people to leave right now." Linda's smile faltered. "Officer, I don't think you understand. No, you don't understand," Carson cut her off. "You can't just declare someone else's land as your own. Either you clear these people out voluntarily, or we start making arrests." For the first time, Linda looked rattled. She turned to the crowd, forcing another smile. "All right, folks, let's wrap it up for today." Slowly, people began to leave, some muttering complaints, others clearly embarrassed that they had been a part of this in the first place. Linda, however, lingered. "This isn't over, Jack," she murmured as she walked past me. I smiled. "Oh, I know." I thought that was the worst of it, that after being humiliated in front of her community and nearly arrested, Linda would finally back down. I couldn't have been more wrong. 2 nights later, I woke up to the acrid smell of smoke. Bolting upright, I grabbed my shotgun and rushed to the back porch. My stomach dropped. The pool was on fire. Flames licked at the water's surface, a sickening chemical blaze fueled by something unnatural. The grass around the pool had caught, the fire creeping toward the wooden deck. I ran for the hose, barely registering the panic in my chest as I doused the flames. It took minutes, long, grueling minutes. But eventually, the fire hissed out, leaving behind blackened patches of scorched earth and a film of gasoline floating on the water's surface. I stood there, breath ragged as realization set in. This wasn't an accident. Someone had poured gasoline into my pool and lit it on fire. And I had a damn good idea who it was. I stormed inside and checked my security footage. Sure enough, at 2:13 a.m., a figure slipped through my fence carrying a gas can. The grainy black and white image wasn't perfect, but the posture, the walk, I'd recognize it anywhere. Linda Prescott. I grabbed my phone and called Deputy Carson. "Mark," I said, voice tight, "I need you back out here, now." By sunrise, Linda was in handcuffs. The footage was damning. Between that, the statements from witnesses at the pool party, and the growing stack of legal complaints against her, Linda was looking at serious charges: trespassing, destruction of property, and arson. But the real kicker? The HOA itself was now under investigation. Turns out, Linda had been pocketing HOA funds for years, using fines and community improvement projects as cover for skimming money. Once her crimes came to light, homeowners turned on her in droves. Within a month, the HOA collapsed. Residents voted to dissolve it entirely, unwilling to let another corrupt board take over. And me, I rebuilt my pool, restored my land, and made damn sure no one would ever try to take what was mine again. Linda? Last I heard, she was facing felony charges, and something told me that in prison, she wouldn't be calling the shots anymore. By the time the sun rose, Linda Prescott was in handcuffs, her face pale and furious as the deputies loaded her into the squad car. The fire marshal had confirmed that the blaze at my pool was intentional, and with the security footage catching her red-handed, there was no denying what she had done. But arson wasn't the only charge she was facing. Once the investigation into the HOA began, things spiraled fast. Turns out Linda had been misusing HOA funds for years, pocketing money through fraudulent fines, fake community improvement projects, and backdoor deals with contractors who overcharged residents in exchange for kickbacks. The homeowners, most of whom had been terrified of crossing her, finally saw their chance to speak out. Within 2 weeks, more than 30 complaints had been filed against her. The county prosecutor wasted no time. Linda wasn't just charged with arson, she was also hit with fraud, embezzlement, and criminal trespassing. The judge denied her bail, citing her as a flight risk. And just like that, the woman who had spent years bullying an entire neighborhood was now looking at 10 to 15 years in prison. As for the HOA, it didn't survive the scandal. The moment the truth about Linda's corruption came out, homeowners turned on the board. An emergency vote was called, and the entire HOA was dissolved. No more ridiculous fines. No more manufactured violations. No more corrupt leadership pretending to protect property values while robbing people blind. The first thing I did? I drained my pool, had it professionally cleaned, and restored my land. It took time, but eventually, everything was back to how it was before Linda and her power-hungry ego tried to take it away. Neighbors who had once kept their distance started stopping by, not just to apologize, but to thank me. Because of my fight, they were finally free from the HOA's grip. Some even volunteered to help with repairs, offering everything from labor to supplies. For the first time in years, Silver Creek Ranch felt like a real community again. And Linda? Last I heard, she took a plea deal, 6 years behind bars. She won't be coming back here anytime soon. If this whole ordeal taught me anything, it's this: stand your ground. Bullies like Linda thrive on fear. They win when people give up, when good folks think it's easier to just go along with it. But when you fight back, when you hold them accountable, and they fall, and sometimes they fall hard.